All right, good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. My name is Hans Augustin. I'm actually one of the business directors here with the Educational Retirement Program. I hope you guys came to take some notes of information. Uh, Congratulations to everybody who got invited to this call. We are big on wealth education. As I've mentioned, my name is Hans Augustin, and I happen to be one of the business directors on the Our Infinite platform. And part of what we do on this platform is not only provide solutions, but one of the first things that we do is make sure that we can help people become more financial literate. What that basically means to me is that as I've had the chance to engage with people across the United States, I basically have learned that there's not enough information on literacy so that people can make better money decisions. I happen to have a history where I worked at Citibank for quite some time, and I realized that even though that I was there at Citibank and I helped people move money in different ways and or manage money from a standpoint of what I did at the bank, I don't know if I really understood it 100% myself. I happen to be fortunately been married for the last 28 years. And one of the other experiences that I had was that I came from a thinking of how to make money. My wife came from a perspective on how to keep money, basically. So there was, for about a 5 year period, a differentiation between thinking, meaning that the way that my wife was taught to think by her parents was, hey, there's a future that you got to preserve from. But I came from a household that says, hey, if you're making enough money, it's okay. We'll figure it out. But what I had to learn when I got married was that there was a reality between how I needed to make sure I could manage money because it was more than just me. There was a family that I became responsible for. One of the things that I've been fortunate, everybody, if this is the first time that you're meeting me or getting connected to our platform, was that just about 24 months ago, I got introduced to this platform after being a small business owner for quite some time and still do a lot of those things today. Had a lot of exposure to real estate and some of the practices there that allowed me to start leveraging the concept of wealth. So tonight, if you've been invited to the call, what I'm going to be talking about is what we call the wealth formula. The wealth formula is something that I want you to grab a pen and paper tonight if you have access to it so that you can go ahead and take some wonderful notes. I tell people I will share a lot of things that are actually on this PowerPoint, and I might add a little bit more just to make sure that you walk away with enough value so that whoever invited you tonight, they you can go say that, you know what, I met this gentleman named Hans Augustin and he actually did an excellent job. So I hope that's what you're going to walk away with. But what I'm going to share with you is what they call the wealth formula. Although I've been around money for a very long time, what I begin to understand that there's a way that you have to think about money because money is actually a currency, which means that if you're looking at this dollar bill, what it really represents is that America calls it currency, they call it capital, they call it money. Money has multiple names. But I would say that if you could just do me a favor, if you agree on in the chat, would you actually agree that most Americans actually do not understand how money works or what to do with a dollar? So if you're on this call today, go ahead and put it in the chat just so I can kind of recognize if you thinking the same or maybe believing the same, or maybe you can believe differently. Do you believe if you put a one in chat that most Americans actually do not understand how money works so I can know who's actually with me tonight as we kind of go through this call? So let me see. Welcome to the call, Miss Denise. Welcome to the call, Miss Ada. Welcome to the call, Miss Denise Marlena. So Miss Tammy, thank you for the ones in the chat. That means you guys are with me. So I want to make sure that tonight, before you walk off the call, there's a conversation that I've been having with people around me about financial literacy. So people say, well, what does that really mean? What that means is I learned that there's two languages that exist in America. One of them is based in poverty and the other one is based in wealth. See, I grew up in an environment where there was a little bit of wealth conversation. I don't know if it was the best one, but I probably grew up more in the concept of a version of poverty language because what I actually was taught was the idea that I should just basically get to a school, which is fine because education is important. In addition to the fact that they said, hey, go ahead and get yourself some good grades. And then basically what you're going to do is you're going to do yourself a favor and get a great job. And I was like, that's cool because this is what I did. I literally went to school, got decent enough grades, got an opportunity to work for Citibank. But then I ran into other people that says, hey, do you know what entrepreneurship is? Or do you understand what a business is? Now, before I share this next piece, I need you to write this down as a particular note. What that means is that there are three forms of money in America that you should be aware of. Because the wealthy people started saying, hey, Hans, well, what if you went to school, the same thing you did, and got yourself those same good grades, but instead of going to work for somebody, what if you actually can open a business? See, what I did not know was that America represents money in three different ways. The first way that they represent money is that, hey, they will educate you to potentially earn income through a job, and they call that income. Nothing's wrong with it. Some people do it part time, some people do it full time, some people are salaried, but that's how they bring in their income. But the challenge with an income is that there is a limitation tied to it, meaning how many hours can you work, or how many hours are you not receiving, or basically if they change the idea that they don't want you to work anymore and now you have no income. But what my peers were telling me was like, hey, did you know that you can also make money in the form of a profit? What that means is that if you understood business, it says that if you have enough income and you have less expenses, you're going to walk away with this form of money called a profit. And I found out, oh, that's great. And that's how I learned about entrepreneurship. But the last piece of information that I've been sharing faithfully, uh, give me 1 second, guys. My apologies. Um, so I just wanted to make sure because I seen somebody call me 2 or 3 times, and I just wanted to make sure. But essentially, what I was trying to make sure is that, hey, if you begin to understand the wealth part, that's the third form of money that I got introduced to. Along the way, people talked about wealth, but I didn't know that you could actually take your income, you can literally take your profits, and you can put it in the wealth bucket. So then when my peers were talking about the idea of business, they were just saying, hey, there's another way to do it. Some people say in the poverty conversation, well, when you find a good job, keep it. That is true, but is it meant to be there forever? Which means that, hey, if you learn the language of wealth or you learn the language of business, you actually can learn how to grow money where maybe you may not have to keep that job anymore because people got to retire at some point or they might want to make different decisions. And I begin to understand that some people would say, hey, money isn't everything, but it literally ranks up there with oxygen, which means that in America, if you don't have enough income circulating, you're going to have a problem. But some people would say, hey, Hans, well, the money is actually the root of all evil. That can be true if you do evil things. But what if you learn how to bless people with your money? What if you learn how to position your children with your money? What if you learn how to position businesses with your money? And you literally can help because a nonprofit organization needs money. Meaning that if you learn the language of literacy of money, then you begin to have a different form of thinking. One of the reasons why I had to learn the language of money is because it said that you have to become a money master. Because what I found out when I was in my early 30s is that I was not a master of money. You have to understand that money is actually a currency. It moves either for you or against you or away from you. And what I was doing with money, it was actually moving away from me. Although I worked from a bank, I literally walked into my own house one day in my early 30s. I'm about 53 years old now, 52 years old. And 30 plus years ago, I walked into my own house and there weren't any lights on. It's not because I didn't make money at a bank. It's because I wasn't really properly educated on how to think about my money and what to do with it. Because this says you are either mastering money or money is actually mastering you. And I got to the place in life where my money was mastering me, and I had to learn how to become the master of the money, or my beautiful wife was going to leave me. Because at the end of the day, what really happened was is that I became a little bit irresponsible on how I managed it. Because literally I told people, here's my experience with money. I definitely was always a hard worker. I always understood that I could make money. I've been working since I was 13 years old. But what if my parents had enough information? They weren't bad people. That's not what I'm saying. But what if they had more financial literacy information? Say, hey, Hans, why don't you save some of that money too? And she may have said it to me, my mom, but I don't know if I had the ears to listen. But what I found out very quickly was that if you learn how to manage your money, like my wife started teaching my kids since they were in their early teens to take their birthday money that they would receive from auntie and uncles and everybody else. And she said, if they gave you $100, we're going to save 50% of it. And what she did was that she came from a house where the language of money was tied to wealth and the understanding of savings and the understanding of growing it. So I tell people as I began to become the money master, things changed because I started understanding what the idea of wealth was. Now, write this down because this is also very important because this is more of a class and we're going to make sure that you understand how to leverage money in your favor. Somebody said, well, what exactly is wealth? They said wealth is the byproduct of that income and that profit being placed in the right soil to make you more money. What if you could position your dollars to be soldiers for you? What if you begin to look at $100 has 100 soldiers? And what would really happen is that you would realize that money actually does grow on trees, right? Remember, some of you guys, maybe your parents said money doesn't grow on trees because they'd walk into a store with you and they would tell you, hey, you can't get this and you can't get that. I don't even know if they were actually being rude, but they were just probably telling you the reality that there's certain things that we can't afford. And maybe you grew up in a different household where your parents could afford those things, and maybe the language of wealth was there. But now what we're trying to do is that we just don't want to make it a wealthy person's conversation. We want to make this a everybody's conversation because we understood that money actually does grow on trees. And when you realize money itself is literally a seed. So the first time I had this conversation, somebody said to me, hey, what if we cut an apple in half and we literally took the seeds out and we found the great place to take those seeds and plant it? We could literally take those seeds and now that same seed would turn itself into an apple tree. So from that one apple, I now have multiple apples. If I took apple trees and I had multiple of them, I would have an apple orchard. And it's the same way that you got to think about a dollar. If I plant $1 in the right place, it'll make $10. If I plant $10 in the right place, it'll make me $100. If I plant $100 in the right place, I'll make it $1,000. What if you had 1,000 soldiers of money working for you, which is the idea that money is a byproduct of the byproduct? Because when I tell people I got here, there was a gentleman by the name of Suni Samad who says, hey, let me teach you some concepts about money. And as I begin to understand that there's a way for you to do this right, what we began doing was teaching what they call the wealth formula. The wealth formula is where you really can learn how to crack a financial code. What that means is that everybody in America, until further notice, until death do us part, you actually have time. I hope you never die. I don't call death. I don't believe in death. I just know it happens. But while you have time, what if you learn that capital is also called money? What if you learned that money was called currency? And what if you took those money and you can put it to work for you? Now you can turn it into working capital. And if you can turn your money over a time period of 10, 20, 30 years to go in and work for you, it actually will give you what they call a rate of return. The interesting thing about this picture is that, hey, over the course of time, you start building yourself a little jar of multiple coins of dollars. The only thing that you have to learn to get this formula right was that you literally got to beat inflation. And how do you beat inflation? Because inflation used to be 3%, but as of some recent information that our director shared with us, the consumer price index today is about 4.2%. That means it's an increase by 1.2%. And that means that you have to figure out how you can grow your money out passing 4.2%. And the other legal way is to actually learn how to beat taxes legally, because I'm not going to jail. If you want to go to jail, you can, but I'm not recommending it. So we teach people how to legally build taxes so that you can build wealth. Because the language of this formula says, if I can teach you how to master money, it will never master you the rest of your life. So I want you to write this down as a form of notes. You say, hey, Hans, that's a great formula, but how does it work? Well, here's where my wife got it right. And here's where I had to catch up. My wife was what you call Mrs. Start Early. What she would do with her children and herself is that maybe somebody taught her, or maybe intrinsically it passed away. Somebody must have shared with her, hey, if you allow your money enough time for interest to compound, that's a key thing. I'm going to teach you guys this formula called the rule of 72. But let's do the time piece first. And you can build your wealth, which is your money making you more money. But what if you started to conceptually or realistically put $3,600 per year? That's just $300 a month. It's $10 a day over a 30-day period. You got $300 that you're going to put money away, and I want you to set it and forget it. What that means, if that money also was in an environment where the interest rate that you could acquire from that money was 8%, it basically means that Miss Lamika, who's my wife, at 25 years old, true story, started to save money. I don't know if it was $3,600 a year, but by the time I met her, she wasn't doing that bad. But what she realized was that that $3,600, if it's in a rate of environment of 8%, it would have been $288 more money than she had before just by putting it in the right place. But then the power of compounding says, well, now that she has $3,888 and she put another $3,600 in that account and she captured another 8%, she would now have 8,087. So that within a 2-year period, she's grown her money to $8,087. What's interesting is that she met me and she says, you know what? You should do better with your money. Real talk. And I didn't listen yet. Maybe my ears weren't ready. I was like, I could do that later. So I was Mr. Start Late. What that meant was that, hey, over the course of time in a 4-year period, if she was following the same strategy, she would have had $17,250 of her money built plus interest that she captured for the right soil environment. I'm 28 and I don't have any money yet. That's why I couldn't pay the PSE&G bill at that time. And what I realized that has I became more educated and exposed to somebody who had a different form of thinking. She was like, well, are you ready yet? I was like, yeah, well, I got to figure out how to pay this bill and you not leave me. So I'm going to start saving some money too. And as I saved money, the difference between me and her was that she understood the laws of compounding interest. And she says, I don't got to save any more money. I got about $34,000. Next year is going to turn 37 because I'm in an environment of 8%. But at 32, I only had 3,880 and I kind of lost a little bit of time. See, time is the formula. But I said, you know what? I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to position my dollars just like she did. Well, by the time she turned 48, she definitely had well over $128,000 saved. But I could do the same thing and did, but I had to put $61,000 of my money or more. This is an example, but true story to me, that literally for me to grow $131,000 in comparison to my wife, she only had to put 2,500 because she understood the laws of time. So I tell people, if you haven't started yet saving any money in a right environment, in the right places, this is the best time to do it now. Or if you have children or people around you that are younger than you can start teaching them to start early. And what that means is as you understand the laws, one of the reasons why we could do that is because you want to take advantage of the rule of 72. See, when I got taught it, I think at the end of the day, it sounded really fancy, which it can be. Somebody says, hey, the rule of 72, you got to get it. Well, I basically tell people what the rule of 72 really means is that you just got to identify the environment of interest that you're going to be in. So that means if you're in a checking account, nothing's wrong with a checking account, but it's not really the best place to grow your money. It's a place to store it until some expense comes to. But even in those environments, those are 0%. But let's say your checking account was paying you 1%. That 1% says, listen, I can have your $10,000 sit here. It's going to be comfortable, but it's going to take you 72 years for you to double it. So 1% divided by 72 means it's going to be 72 years before this $10,000. But if you start talking to some of the professionals on our platform, they'll say, hey, I could possibly teach you how to put it in a 4% environment, anywhere to as a 10% environment. Now, maybe people have a lot of high yield savings because you should have one because you need emergency dollars. But at least in that environment at 4% divided by 72, $10,000 would double itself to $40,000 by the time it took a 18-year period to do it. But it says the quality of your soil determines the quantity of your harvest. So we started teaching people 10% environments, 8% environments. The 10% number says if I take 10% divided by 72, it says every 7.2 years, if I had $10,000 only sitting there, by the time I turned 65, I would have saved and grown my money to $320,000. What's powerful about this concept is that we're teaching you the idea to grow your money, your capital, your currency. Those are the forms of money, your income, your profits. Those are all names that are tied to money to get a rate of return. Now, let me teach you something that I didn't know. People don't understand the concept of what they call BOLI. It's what they call a bank-owned life insurance policy. See, people think life insurance is only for you to pass away. But ask yourself a question. Is there a reason why Bank of America saved $24 billion in a cash value life insurance? Is there a reason why some of the biggest banks in America, like Wells Fargo or JP Morgan, at least put $12 billion worth of their money in cash value? And actually, it's really not their money. It's really your money. They go into that checking account. Maybe they go into the savings account because they are a depository and they got rules on how to leverage your money to collect more interest on their behalf. What that means is that they're not doing anything illegal. They literally are learning how to leverage our money in America. So what if we started teaching you how to do this and you begin to understand the power? So do me a favor tonight. I need you to research BOLI so you don't just say what I said so that you can know that this is true, but I've looked it up. See, what Bank of America and all these other organizations and people who understand how to leverage their money, they begin to realize that there was only three ways in America for you to grow your money. What they said was that, hey, I can literally put my money in a fixed environment. And in a fixed environment, what I can literally do is say, yes, my money is secure. I can get some decent rates, but it's not the fastest environment. Now, what if they said that if I put it in a variable account, what they can do now in a variable account, they say, yes, I can capture high interest rates that might even be at 20%, but you have to understand the laws of a variable account. The laws of a variable says, yes, while I can gain you 20 and possibly 30%, I can also lose you 20% of your money or worse, lose all of it, depending on the timing of the market. It doesn't mean it's a bad account. It just means an account that you need to understand. If you're going to leverage that, or that's where you feel comfortable growing your money, you got to know that there's a possibility to win and there's a possibility that you could lose. But then somebody said, what if I married a fixed account and a variable account? It created this baby called index. And so all an index account is the guarantees of a fixed account and the environments of the possibilities of a variable account, but without taking any losses, because a index account says, hey, I'm going to grow my money over the course of time. I will increase the values of my money over the course of time. But when these periods of losses occur, my money is protected in a zero floor environment. I'm going to share with you guys this video to kind of give you some more context. Let me just make sure I can reshare my sound so you guys can get a concept for this. I wanted to make sure that you kind of get the concept in full. So let me just click on this link so that I can share this information with you. And let me know if you could see it by giving me a quick chat. All right, I forgot about, give me 1 second. All right.
Zero.
Let me
It
know if
shows
you
up
guys can hear
every
this.
day, usually as the villain, not the hero. But an indexed universal life insurance policy allows Zero to be your hero. First, it provides a death benefit to your family if you die. It also has a cash value component that credits interest to the policy based in part on changes in a major market index like the S&P 500. Why credit interest based on a stock market index? 2 words: potential and protection. Indexed universal life insurance offers protection from index declines with a feature called the floor. The floor allows Zero to be your hero. So how does it work? Well, let's keep it simple. You pay a premium to the insurance company. Your premiums are put into an account called the basic strategy. A portion of those premiums are used to cover 12 months of policy expenses, so they'll stay in there. Premium dollars paid in excess of the 12 months of policy expenses go into the interest crediting strategies of your choice. Insurance companies can have different types of strategies and can use different indexes like the MSCI or S&P 500. We're going to show you a point-to-point strategy. The point-to-point strategy calculates the interest based on a set period of time, usually 1 or 5 years. The beginning and end of the time period are the 2 points. When the change is positive, your policy is credited interest after applying any caps and participation rates. Here, the market has a positive change of 18%. After caps and participation rates, the policy realizes the potential of the market index up to the cap of 12%. When the change in your strategy is negative, it doesn't impact the cash value in the policy because you're protected by the 0% floor. The market had a change of negative 15%. Thanks to the floor, the strategy bucket gets a 0% interest credit. Remember, though, that policy expenses will continue to come out of the policy. Indexed universal life insurance provides a death benefit and offers the potential for cash value accumulation while never exposing your premium dollars to the risk of market downturns, making Zero your hero.
So I wanted to share this video with you guys because as you begin to understand the concept that I'm going to share with you guys the rest of the night, you'll begin to kind of have some exposure. Let me just make sure I'm resharing my screen, so just bear with me so that you can take the rest of these notes because we're almost there. So now you understand the idea of an index and you understand how variable accounts potentially work and fixed account. Let's give you a little bit better information. The reason why you got to beat inflation is because there's an understanding that if you don't, now the formula says I'm going to take some time, I'm going to actually put my money in the right environment, I'm going to take my capital, and I'm going to get a rate of return. But there's 2 people that you have to learn to beat. The 2 people that you have to learn to beat is inflation, number 1. Why? It says, are prices going up or is the value of your dollar going down? Well, as long as inflation exists, that means the value of your dollars are actually decreasing. I've been in New Jersey for over 20 plus years, but when I got here the very first time, what I realized is that if you're anywhere close to the East Coast, or if you're familiar with the East Coast, there's this bridge called the George Washington Bridge that I had to cover in order to cross in order to get into New Jersey from New York. Well, when I first got here in 1998, that same bridge used to be $4 per crossing. And now today, that same bridge is $16. So same bridge, but more costs. Matter of fact, when I got off the bridge, if you're familiar with New Jersey at all, if you've ever been on Route 4, Route 4 says, hey, there's a couple and plenty of gas stations because there's a lot of people traveling in from New York or coming down from the northern parts of the state and cutting through New Jersey so they can get south. So there's so many gas stations on Route 4. Well, when I got off the very first gas station at the same time, it literally said that you got to pay dollar per gallon. And what that meant was that in the dollar per gallon today, the same gas station is anywhere from $4 to $5. So if you begin to understand that for the last 10 years prior to recently, that the rate of inflation was averaging at least 3%, that means you need to realize that the value of your dollars are actually decreasing by 3% per year. So unless your money grows at a rate of that supersedes inflation, it means that you're literally losing money. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes that, are you growing your money in the right environments? So how do we beat Uncle Sam legally? Is by understanding how taxes really work in America. So if you have a mutual fund, if you happen to have a stock or a CD or a savings account, you just want to understand that as you leverage interest in those spaces or you withdraw interest in those spaces, you're going to be taxed immediately. And if you understand the laws of how you're going to get taxed, now you know how to leverage money. Or if you decide to defer your taxes. So plenty of people in America have a 401k. I've been in a lot of schools where people have 403bs or they can have an IRA. What that basically means is that you've decided to defer your tax responsibilities into the future. That means these accounts are organized for you after age 59 and have to be distributed. So the IRS rule says, hey, if you happen to have a 401k, we're really telling you to use this money after age 59 and a half. Now, you can borrow against your account. That's a strategy. But if you decide to withdraw from that account prior to age 59 and a half, you just gave the IRS permission, which I've done before, not knowing, to charge you 10% in penalty fees. What that means is if you had $50,000 and you got charged 10%, it means it would cost you $5,000 worth of money. And then because you withdrew it early, you can pay more taxes. So what you want to understand is the laws of how you're leveraging your money in a tax deferred environment. But I don't know how many of you guys like the word free, but I love that idea. I don't want something for nothing, but I don't mind you giving me a courtesy. And the government says, I'll give you a courtesy in a tax-free environment. That means if you learn how to leverage a Roth IRA, which is a tax-free environment, it says that if you're under the age of 50, you could take $7,000, $7,600 per year. If you're over the age of 50, you can start storing up to $8,600 per year. But when you use this money towards retirement, 100% of the interest that you've captured or the dollars that you've captured, you can position your money to be tax-free. But then you said, Hans, how come a life insurance is tax-free? Well, there's two things that happen in a tax insurance world, especially in the permanent one. Whether you have a term or a traditional policy, when that benefit gets paid out to the family, unfortunately, when somebody passes away, if you received $1 million, it's 100% tax-free. But you say, well, Hans, why do I got to wait to pass away to use this money? Well, you don't, because life insurance has actually changed. There are living benefits that tell you how to actually access your money when there's tax-free scenarios when in health. And if you learn how to leverage tax advantage account, you can learn how to distribute money, which is income, right? So the whole idea is how do I create more income? How do I create a retirement plan? How do I position myself to access money tax-free? And these are the environments that you learn to leverage your money so you can create the different tax advantages. As you begin to understand the laws of tax, let me share with you a strategy that we've been effectively teaching people in America. Write this down as a note. We found out there are three things that are going to happen to people. Either you're going to die too soon, unfortunately, or you might end up becoming ill. I, unfortunately, 3 years ago experienced a kidney challenge. Thank God for some of the resources that I was able to have in place. But when people get ill, what really happens is that how do they access money if they can't work? Or what if you live too long? That's the category I'm hoping to get into. But how do you access and leverage money? So it says your greatest asset is your ability to produce income, meaning that the reason why we get up every day is because we have to take care of our families. But if you no longer have the ability to take care of your family, that means you're not going to have access to money unless you've met some of the smart advisors who work in our organizations where they can teach you the three principles on how to leverage a strategy. So what we've learned to do is we understood what the banks were doing. We were like, okay, well, why is JP Morgan Chase saving $12 billion in a cash value life insurance? Well, they understood something called the wealth formula too. They could leverage over the course of time some of the capital that's in the bank accounts that you guys manage, and they can get themselves a rate of return of anywhere from 6.5% conservatively as high as 15% or more, depending on the environment that we're able to grow the money. They also understood that they could create a tax advantage. A tax advantage for everybody tonight is your ability to walk away with money potentially tax free. Or they understood that if the formula was to build inflation, if you guys think inflation is 4% or 3%, 6% is 2% better. For your money to grow, 15% is blowing you out of the park. That means you're making 11% more on your money. Around, you guys do the math. But here's what you guys want to understand. There are codes in the tax code. The tax code says, hey, growth in an investment account tied to a genuine life insurance policy cannot be classified as income, therefore it cannot be taxed. If you begin to understand this code, it'll say, unlike a 401k loan against your money void of taxes and penalties, we can create a situation where we could leverage. So here's what one of my peers done, and here's what I've also done for my own family. What I've learned to do is if I'm going to be as strategic as leveraging a tax advantage, what my peer did was say, hey, I'm going to use a 20-year funding period for my child. I'm going to save $156 a month. And I'm going to put my $156 a month in an environment where it can get a rate of return of anywhere from 6 to 15% outside of the cost of the life insurance policy. Because this is a tax advantage environment. But if unfortunately something was to happen and they died too soon, it means that $500,000 of tax-free money would go to the beneficiary. Nobody's in a rush to collect any money on somebody passing away, but it happens. But the real reason why he built this account was that he says, I want my family to live long. He's going to put the money in an environment where he can not only protect the reality of that future family, but he could teach his son how to grow his money by the time he turns 69 to $730,000. By the time he gets in his retirement assets, he'd have $1 million worth of tax-free access money. Now, we want to understand the language of how to do this properly, but what if his son became sick? He says, well, listen, son, if unfortunately there's a reason that you became terminally ill, if unfortunately you became a challenge like Hans Augustine, who had a chronic illness, what if you had a critical illness that would not allow you to work? Well, son, based on the chronic illness, I can either make sure you have access to money of $11,000 per month if you were having this challenge at age 65 or earlier, or if there were critical injuries that you could experience, I can teach you how to leverage this $500,000 to receive money from a tax advantage standpoint to actually take care of your family and yourself. So what we've learned to do is tell people strategically, let's teach the people about compounding interest. Let's teach the people about leveraging index strategy. Let's teach the people how to participate in the gains, but position their monies for no losses. The reason why you want to understand it says, although we no longer investing in active income, the cash value continues to grow no matter what. What that means is that if you didn't leverage it as income, this money is going to still grow and outpace the realities of this future family. See, I told people I came here to teach people about legacy, which means that how do I create a situation where my money becomes active beyond my own understanding so that I could pass it on to my family, children's children's children. So I tell people, you want to understand that there are environments where, unfortunately, yes, you could be growing your money, but you can take losses too if you're not in the right environment. See, here's what an index account does for us. An index account says, hey, I can use certain strategies to grow my money, but although there was challenges in 2008 where unfortunately there was a housing crisis or there was loss of values, if you were in an indexed environment, your money was protected and still growing. If you were part of COVID 2020's period where there was an issue where most people couldn't work or there was challenges for people to get to work and income was slowing, while the markets might have been doing differently in certain types of account, in an index environment, it says if you were in an index environment, you would have gained, you wouldn't have gained anything, but you wouldn't have lost a penny. That means when the markets are challenged, all we can do is say 0% got added to the account, but the 17, the 16%, or the 23%, or the 29% that was captured in these environments, they were gained and kept. So we teach people strategies. So here's what I recommend. Whoever invited you tonight, they're a licensed professional. They pretty much work with anyone who really has a good intent. But what they really wanted to do was make sure that you walked away with some education so that when you sit at the table, they can come up with a qualified strategy that makes sense. And one of the things that all our professionals do is make sure that every 6 months to a year, they actually become your coach so that they can help you hit your financial goals. So I happen to be one of the business directors on the platform. I am definitely excited the fact that you guys had a chance to be connected to this information. I'd love to open up the line for anybody who's here tonight that actually has any questions before we wrap up tonight. But I wanted to make sure that this information was solid. But before we close out, is there any questions from any of the guests or folks that are on tonight so I can make sure that before we walk away, we can answer any particular question? All right. I appreciate everybody. Thank you for taking the time. You guys have an excellent evening. If you have somebody that you believe that should get access to this information, myself or another presenter will be here next Thursday evening around the same time with the intent to impact your family with legacy information and wealth details. You guys have a great evening and thank you for taking the time.